So welcome, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here today. I am so honored that all of you guys showed up to celebrate the book with me. We got you to downtown Calgary, a lot of you. It's a big feat. And here we are. Yeah, indeed, I did spend a lot of hours in this room, sometimes with my kids walking up and down the streets of Calgary with my mom being entertained while I worked. But we're here to celebrate the launch of the book, and I've received so much support from all of you. But I just want to say that this book is not my story. This book is not about me. I feel a lot about this book, as I do about our ranch, Trails End in the Hills, that it's just mine for a little while. It's mine to take care of for this time. And these stories of these women were just mine to tend to and to put together to share with all of you. So I'm so glad that you're here to listen to them. So what was the catalyst for writing this book? Brian already talked about a few of the things. But it began when I returned to my roots on the ranch about 15 years ago. I grew up here in Calgary. I went down to my grandparents' ranch in Nanton for the summer, and I was hooked. Then I met a cowboy. You guys know the rest of that story. And now I'm selling beef and chasing kids. I found myself in Nanton in the midst of this thriving, living ranch culture. I saw my Aunt Mavis running the family ranch so competently. I went into branding pens and on cattle drives and was at the rodeos surrounded by women everywhere, and they were handy. They had skills with a horse, with a cow, with a dog, with a rope, and these weren't skills learned overnight. These were deep, inherited skills passed down generationally. I mean, I didn't have any practical skills other than I could kind of ride a horse and I could read books, if that counts as a practical skill. So I came into this ranching community at Nanton at a time when my analytical perspective and my theoretical consciousness was being shaped by my studies at university. I was curious about this living culture that I was witness to and how that ranching culture fit into the notion of the West as a literary and as a historical construct and as a real place. So when I went back to school to start to do my digging, what I found was that ranch women weren't a part of the historiography of the West in an academic sense at all. In the Western Canadian history classes, I learned about the suffragists, which is really apt today on our day to vote municipally, the characters from the red light districts, of course, and there was a lot of talk of farm women. The farm women I read about, they homesteaded, they toiled, they raised big families, they cooked to feed the threshing crews, but the stories that I was hearing didn't reconcile with what I knew of my own Granny Con and her sister Mary, and my great-grandmother that I'd heard in family lore. I mean, Mary had taught me how to work a cow from a horse. When I was about 11 and she was about 80, we went to move some cows from the neighbor's back. And what I knew of these women was that they were independent, they were resourceful, they were capable, and they were so confident in their environment. And that was something that I wasn't getting a sense of from what I got to read at school. So where were the stories of ranching women? I was curious. And then Dr. Ellison, he's somewhere in the room somewhere. Oh. Then he stopped me one day in the hall after class and said, "What are you doing next year?" I said, "I don't know, riding horses. I don't know what I'm going to do when I graduate." And he says, "You need to come and do your master's with me." Well, I don't even know what a master's is. How do you do a master's? So he pretty much said, "You're coming and doing it." So I did, and I am so glad that I did. And he persevered with me. So then it was time to start research. And the research was the easy part. Right away, I found stories and evidence of a long history of ranching women. It was fun, but the challenge, and it was right there, was that it just hadn't been put together in an academic analysis. There was great stuff in print. I really recommend A Voice of Her Own, which it had just come out in 2005. It's a collection of interviews with contemporary women ranchers. I drew a lot from Cowgirls. It's a collection of stories and memoirs and cowgirl poetry. So the material was there. It was just my job to put it together to something that could fit into a university classroom. For the primary research, I was able to start with my own family. I'm so lucky that my family kept our family record in the attic at the Midway Ranch and in Granny's bedroom. We have a huge collection of letters, diaries, guest books from the ranch in the hills, and that's what you can see here in this image. A lot of the evidence I found wasn't even written down, and some of that I drew from doing interviews with local families, and that's something now, looking back, I wish I had done a little bit more of. But also, I'm really grateful for Lorraine Lounsbury, who was with the Glenbow at the time. I came in here one afternoon to meet with her, and she's the one who pointed me at using material artifacts. Of course, the coat I'm wearing today is my great-grandmother's riding habit, and that kind of evidence of their working life is right there in front of us in the worn side saddles, in the saddles that are in all of our family tack rooms. We had a saddle in our tack room that was specifically designed for a woman to ride astride in a stock saddle. It was called the mother and child saddle with a padded seat, and it was designed so that a child could sit right in front of her on the range. I mean, obviously, women were out there. So, where am I here? Sorry, you guys. I'm gonna get myself gathered. So those material artifacts and the letters and the research was the easy part. Then there were challenges. With so much evidence and research and material out there, it was hard to synthesize the mountain of material and condense it into book form. I felt like I could write a book on any of the topics I touched on. Women and horses, clothing, ranch work, childbirth. As most of you know, this entire process of getting prepared for my master's defense, publishing, getting the book to where it is today was interrupted time and again, put on pause by the many events that happened in real life. But it was in my real life that helped me develop a sense of continuity and connection with the women that I was writing about. As an academic historian, I've been educated to analyze for change over time, but as a woman in agriculture, there's simply so many things about our lives that don't change. And I came across a quote very early in my research, and it resonated with me and influenced this theme of continuity that I chose to write about in the book. Gretel Ehrlich says, "A person's life is not a series of dramatic events for which he or she is applauded or exiled, but a slow accumulation of days, seasons, years, fleshed out by the generational weight of one's family and anchored by a land-bound sense of place." So that grounded me and guided me with my writing and as I faced the challenges in my own life. In this book, I'm looking at the first and second generation of ranch women from the 1880s to the 1930s. And many of the patterns and events in the lives I was researching, I was echoing in my own. I could relate to their challenges. I lost a brother at war. I started a ranch and a cow herd. I had 2 babies. I lost my mother, and now I'm aiding my father as he is ailing. So it was these things that made me realize so much of our stories are universal. Life happens, particularly when you add in livestock. And even though there are obvious changes in our modern ranch life, I like to call it computer ranching, my life is still shaped by the rhythms of the seasons and the routines of ranch life, just like the first and the second and the third, and now the 4th generation of ranchers are experiencing.